I'd like to introduce our newest sponsor, Swim Angelfish. Swim Angelfish is an online certification program that strengthens your teaching curriculum to serve swimmers of all abilities. Swim Angelfish will prepare you and your instructors with the skills to teach swimmers with autism, physical disabilities, anxiety, sensory and motor conditions, and more. Learn to teach skills faster and with more comfort with Swim Angelfish. Apply for an Only Alpha Pool Product Scholarship and receive up to 50% off your certification. Go to swimangelfish.com today to apply. Looking to host your first swim meet or replacing an old timing system? Run a swim meet with ease from your laptop using Superior Swim Timing. You can use Superior Swim Timing with your existing equipment, or they can provide you with a complete timing solution, including deck harnesses, buttons, and starter. SST is fully compatible with High-Tech and Team Unify, as well as Colorado, Daktronics, and Amiga touchpads. Go to superiorswimtiming.com to learn more, and be sure to tell them I sent you. Nate's come out with another awesome tool for the swimming community. It's called Swim Nerd Live, and it allows the data and times from your actual scoreboard to be broadcast and viewed in real time on any smart TV, phone, or other device. It has all the information you're looking for: event, heat, lane, name of swimmer, times, and places. One click on any device and they're watching your swim meet live in real time. Go to swimpractice.com to learn more. All right, Giaan Rooney, finally I get you on the podcast. How you doing?
It's only taken us how long?
Trying to pin this down for a while.
Absolutely. But no, thrilled to be on. Usually you only have superstars and pop stars. What am I doing here?
I know. Yeah, I'll tell you what, you said the word thrilled. I was thrilled. I was just going through your Wikipedia page and I found my name on it. I was like, yes. I was like, it says here training partners, while you're in Melbourne was Matt Welsh and Michael Klim. And then there's this long sentence after. I was like, oh, okay, all right. They didn't recognize me. And then right at the end, it's like, and Brett Hawke. I'm like, yes, I made it.
Yeah. You're integral, my friend. You taught me how to train smarter, not harder.
Yeah, I think I was kind of one of the first at the time, kind of into that system a little bit, right?
Absolutely. Because I only knew how to absolutely punish myself, and my body just wasn't holding up anymore, especially by the time I got to Melbourne. And you were one of the ones that taught me how to do it properly as a sprinter. And I was going back to my sprinting roots.
Yeah. Well, I think we were lucky. We had Popey, who was good in the respect that he was good at a lot of things, but he was good in the respect of that he allowed you to have input into the program too, and there's not a lot of coaches like that. And so I think for us as older athletes, we all had a little bit where we could kind of interject into what we wanted and how we wanted to do things a little bit. And he certainly gave me freedom to kind of explore what I wanted and how I wanted to do it within the boundaries of his system, for sure. So
absolutely. It took me actually a long time to figure out that. And I'm quite fascinated by that transition of athletes when they go from an age group athlete to or a child to an adult, because ultimately, as you just said, a coach needs to be able to transition with that person as they make that transition. But I know with my first coach, Dennis Cottrell, who was unbelievable, and I credit him with so much, but I always felt like a child in that relationship because I was basically until I left him at 19 to go to Melbourne, and it was very much a one-way street, but that's also all I knew. And so coming to Popey in Melbourne and actually him asking, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
What do you need to do today?
Yeah.
Was completely mind-blowing, because I was like, what do you mean? You're the coach. You just tell me.
Yeah. We had a squad. Hey, we had an awesome squad, you know.
We had an awesome squad. We had, far out. We had some good times, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Do you still think of yourself as an athlete, or is that in the past?
Probably because I haven't swum a lap since the day I retired in March 2006. That I don't really think of myself as an athlete anymore. It feels like another person almost. It feels like such another lifetime ago. And it's funny, I was only thinking about it the other day, where the older I get, actually the prouder I become of my achievements. And I actually recognize them for what they are, because I think I probably, and I still feel this way, I was an above average athlete in a superstar era, and I was tarnished with the same brush of a lot of, you know, our contemporaries who were around at the time. And I feel I always felt almost like a bit of an imposter in that world, that I was mentioned in the same names as some of our best athletes of all time. And I certainly was not that, and I am not that. And so it's funny how I guess I always pushed a lot of my achievements down and was very keen to move on with the rest of my life and prove that I could do something else. But the older I get, funnily enough, the prouder I become of those swimming achievements, because I recognize how hard it actually is, how hard the sport is, and how brutal the sport can be, and how much goes into it. And sometimes when the equation doesn't work, it really doesn't work.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And you should be proud. I mean, I'm looking at your accomplishments now over here, and I'm like, I'm reminded, I know of them, but I'm reminded of them when I look at them, like, holy shit. I mean, G was good at I mean, you swam everything, the 50 back, the 200 free, relays, and I mean, you won everywhere. But you were kind of a little bit of a child prodigy too, like winning the Com Games at 15, right?
Yeah. And do you know what? It's really funny, because if you go back to it, that's actually, you know how I talk about life in sliding doors moments, like that movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, and the fact that there's so many moments in my life where I look back and say, whoa, if that hadn't happened, that wouldn't have happened. I would never have met that person. Yeah. And Com Games was actually a sliding doors moment for me, because up until that point, I'd only really dedicated myself to the sport of swimming about 18 months prior. I loved netball. I know you don't have netball in the States, but netball over here, and I was a state rep netballer as a teenager, and I used to swim in the summer and play netball in the winter. Right. And I loved my netball. And you know, it was a really big decision. And it was actually Dennis who sat me down and said, look, you've actually got to decide if you've got a bit of talent, but you've got to decide if you want to give swimming a crack, you've got to do it now. And you've got to start training in the winter. You've got to start training in the mornings. You've got to actually give this sport a proper chance. And it was a family decision where we sat around the dining table, as all my decisions were back then, as a 13-year-old. And it was actually my dad that said, look, I know you don't want to give up your netball, but for my money, you can always come back to netball, whereas swimming is a sport that you have to dedicate yourself to now. So why don't you give it 12 months and see what happens? And so that was like 13 and a half. And I was nothing special at that stage. And then once I dedicated myself to swimming and properly started training and concentrating on it, I saw great improvement really quickly. And making that Commonwealth Games team at 15, I got third in the 100 back at the Australian trials. So they took me, because I actually made a national team before I made a state team, which is hilarious. Wow. But they thought it would be a great experience and, you know, give this young kid a bit of a shot. And so I went to Com Games in KL in 1998, and I was such an outside chance that I was 300 to 1 to win the 100 back. So even my dad didn't put any money on me.
Dad put $5
to still like really furious about the fact that he didn't. And I don't know, something happened. I found that that inner beast, if you like, and it just came out in that final of that 100 back, and I won that 100 back, and meant I got to swim the medley relay as well, which we won as well. So I came home as a 15-year-old with 2 Commonwealth Games gold medals, and all of a sudden I understood that what the Australian swim team was about. I understood what it meant to wear the green and gold, and I never wanted to not have that feeling again. So from that was, as I said, sliding doors moment, strangely enough, of I want this and I want this feeling again, and I'm prepared to do anything for this to continue.
That's pretty cool that you had that at 15. But you know, you said this inner beast came out of you, and you kind of like, if you look at your career, you had moments like that spread out throughout your whole career. You know, where you're winning Olympic gold medals and World Championship gold medals, and I mean, this inner beast came out in you. I mean, you're a beautiful woman. Everybody knows that, but it's like there's something else inside you. There's this darker person in you that hates to lose, right? So like, who's this person?
Yeah. It's hilarious because if you know me now, I am not competitive in any way, shape, or form. Like, it's hilarious. I'm not a competitor. I'm competitive with myself in this, but I'm not competitive with anyone else. Whereas when I swam, I can describe it perfectly. You know that I basically hated training by the end of it, but I loved racing. I loved racing. Right. And if I could say we could be like a footballer or a basketballer and get to race every week, that's why I love the NCAA program. I, you know, wish that I probably would have had a chance to do that or something like that. I might still be 38 and try and make the Australian swim team because I loved racing. Yeah. And it was like I would walk out. I wasn't an athlete that got nervous. I got excited. And sometimes I had to actively work at getting myself nervous because I knew that that's when I raced the best. The bigger the meet, the better I swam. The more pressure, the better I swam. Right. And I would walk out behind the blocks, and any vision that there's there, you know, I'd walk out with this big smile on my face and wave to the crowd like a cheerleader when my name was announced. And inside I was like, get the hell out of my way, bitches. I've worked harder than you. I deserve this more than you. Yeah. Might have been a few more superlatives in there, but it was my way of getting almost angry with the situation and backing myself 100% to say, I knew I'd done the work. I trained with Grant Hackett and Daniel Kowalski and these, you know, in these distance squads that were just nuts. I knew I'd done more work than any other of the girls standing up next to me. And so that's where I got my confidence from, was I've worked harder, therefore I deserve it more, therefore get out of my way. And
yeah, there was a lot of women that came out of Dennis' you know, like you must have had that inner beast in you, because there weren't a lot of women that were successful coming out of Dennis's pro. There's a lot of men, and it seemed to be like one of those situations where guys were just up against each other, grinding it out. So how's this young 15, 16-year-old girl mixing in with all these men that are just beating up on each other every day?
I think it's, again, so grateful for it, because it's not like there was a female time cycle. It's not like there was a session that was for me. I kept up with the slowest man in the squad, or I didn't keep up. And it was probably even more so in the mornings. We used to have, like, to describe the Miami Swim Club on the Gold Coast is that in the mornings particularly, it is basically like open water swimming. You have every triathlete, you have every surf swimmer that at that stage was competing in the Uncle Toby's Surf Series of both men and women in the squad with you. So there would quite easily be 15, 16 people per lane. And these surf swimmers, they want to tap you on the feet. They're not, they're not starting 10 seconds behind you in the time cycle. They're like on you, and you are in whitewater the whole time. And I thrived on that, because all of a sudden I had an ability to also keep up with the surf swimmers and the triathletes, and they were males. And again, I had to find a way to keep up with the someone. So there was always competition, and I was always inspired by the athletes around me. I mean, to watch Grant Hackett train and to watch Dan Kowalski train and to watch these athletes just push themselves to physical illness every day is mind-blowing. And we were a very, very, very tight-knit squad. They were my family. And they never treated me like I was the only girl. They treated me like I was a bona fide member of the squad, which I was, so that I'd have days where I was pumping them up and they'd have days where they were pumping me up. And, you know, anyone who says that it's an individual sport, it might be an individual sport on race day, but every other moment of it, I absolutely relied on my family, my team to get me through. And so that squad was instrumental in, we did some big Ks and big sessions and big weeks. And as I said, it's what gave me the confidence to stand up on race day and say, you know what, I deserve this. I'm capable of this and I deserve it.
Who are you more like? Are you more like your mum or your dad?
Good question. I've got a hilarious family in the fact that my dad is a former air traffic controller. And my mum's been kind of in my mum's kind of been in the fashion world her whole life in a way. And so my mum is glass is half full. My dad is glass is half empty. My dad is a warrior. My mum is let life be. And I somehow sit probably in the middle. And I'm definitely a much more positive person by nature. But I also have this probably calculated risk component of my brain, which is from my dad. So I'd say that I'm a good mix, but when it came to my swimming, I was definitely my mum. There was no negative. There was no, I can't do this. There's no what ifs, or it was just have a crack, see what happens. You've done the work, let it happen. So it was pretty cool.
What about for you, the lead up to Sydney? What was that like for you? For me, I was a little bit older at that stage. I was around, 24, 25. And so kind of coming towards that part of your career is like make or break. You're still young enough where you could afford to slip up a little bit and still have a good career. But was there a lot of pressure for you leading into that event?
Funnily enough, yes and no. Sydney was awesome. Like, as you said, it was this incredible Australian swim team of young athletes coming through.
Yeah.
More mature, experienced athletes who probably, if an Olympics in their home country hadn't have been the draw card, they might have retired before then.
Yeah.
And we even had some that had Hayley Lewis made a comeback to compete in Sydney. So we had this exceptional team, and I felt more so excited more than anything else. And I was trying to I remember trying to draw on the wisdom of you more experienced crew, but also letting in some ways or allowing the enormity of this situation to sink in, because knowing it was, I mean, how many athletes get to experience a home Olympics in a home country? Like so few. And so knowing that I swam well under pressure, I almost wanted the enormity of the situation to sink in. I didn't want to try and play it down. I wanted to feel that energy. And Sydney was awesome. I was rooming with Susie O'Neill, like my idol, and people like that. And it was absolutely extraordinary. But as a 17-year-old, on one hand, you've got this just 15-year-old Liesl Jones winning an individual silver medal. You've got the men's team on the very first night, Thorpe winning the 400 free and then the 4x1 freestyle relay, where it just lifted the whole team. Like we all of a sudden, it was like, whoa, okay, we're swimming fast at a home Olympics with all our family and friends in the crowd. Like, let's go, like, let's do it. And it was awesome.
Yeah, you handled that well then, because when I walked out, I couldn't breathe. I was like,
that is the difference of sometimes of experience and maturity versus unbridled youth.
Yeah. Just like, oh, look, there's a crowd.
Oh, hey.
But you ended up winning a medal there, right? You what'd you get there? You got a silver in the medley.
I got a silver in the 4x2. Yep. Swam the heats of the 4x1 medley relay, and we got a silver in the 4x2 freestyle relay. And it was, I mean, winning a medal was just insane. It was absolutely insane. And it was probably at that time that I was having a little bit of a, not issue, but I was I was coming from a backstroker and doing a lot more freestyle work, a lot more distance work in training. And so that was kind of that transition period between turning from backstroke to freestyle, and nothing was firing particularly well, but still came away, with 2 silver medals. So I was pretty happy.
And that inspired you, I guess, for next year. You know, Fukuoka was just one of those memorable years for Australian swimming where you know, Don Talbot wanted us to finally win the gold medal count in at a World Championships and beat the US. And that was kind of one of those memorable teams. But for you, it was particularly memorable by winning the 200 freestyle there too, right?
Yep. It was this was an amazing meet on a number of levels. Swimming was really big in Australia at that stage, obviously, and it was goodness, are you there?
Yeah, it's all good.
Oh, you can see me. Sorry, I don't know what just happened then, but you have gone.
Oh, I have. Okay, I can still see you. Everything's still clear
See
on
me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll talk to you. I can't see you, but I'll keep talking. Sorry, I'll start again on that question.
Yeah.
Fukuoka was an amazing time in the fact that, I mean, I have so many stories from that meet. It's unbelievable, and they're all coming back to me. But 2001, first of all, we went over. I trained on the Gold Coast, but I'm the palest kid in the world. Like, I get some 10 minutes. And anyway, we arrived in Japan, and it was crazy. Like, remember how it was just crazy that how much the Japanese public loved Australian swimming. And
especially Thorpe too.
Thorpe was just being mobbed at the airport. There was security everywhere. He was like a rock star had arrived, and they all wanted access to him. It was unbelievable. There was an Aussie beef convention going on in our hotel, and all of a sudden the Australian swim team was like the special guest, because we would just clear out their buffet of Aussie beef every night at the hotel. But I'll never forget the first day we arrived in the morning, and Dennis was like, we're going to go and do a training session. I was like, cool. Competition pool wasn't open just then, so we trained outdoors, and it was the middle of summer, and we're in the pool at midday in Fukuoka. And, you know, Hackey's fine. He's, you know, sun all okay. I ended up with heat stroke, sunstroke after the very first training session, even though plastered in sunscreen. But I got proper sunstroke in Fukuoka before World Champs started, and was actually throwing up back at the hotel, and the team doctor had to give me an injection to stop me throwing up. And I'll never forget that now. Cool way to head into World Championships. Awesome. But managed to recover. And then the next interesting story out of there is we had the 4x2 freestyle relay first. And a lot of people in Australia seem to remember this moment because it was massive at the time. But I had Linda McKenzie, Patria Thomas, and Elka Graham and myself swimming the 4x2 freestyle relay. I was anchor leg. We won in a championship record time, and we were in the middle of our interview on pool deck, live to Australian TV, and it came up that we were disqualified. And we were kind of ushered off by our media manager, and we were like, what did we get disqualified for? We know we didn't break. We were actually quite slow on most of our changeovers, very, very safe. And so we couldn't work out what we got disqualified for. As it turns out, I distinctly remember I was anchor leg of that 4x2. And, you know, we finished, we won. It was amazing. And a Japanese cameraman actually came up to the rest of the girls and said, oh, you jump in. You know, jump in. I get great pictures of you celebrating together.
Wow.
So the rest of the girls jumped in the water, not even thinking about it. And as it turned out, lane 8, I believe, hadn't finished swimming. And it was a new rule brought in that you couldn't jump in until all swimmers had finished the race. So we got disqualified for that. But, you know, we still had to do drug testing, still had to do press conference, still had to do all of that. And then Elka and I had to, I think we got to bed at about 1:30, and it was big news back home in Australia that we got disqualified even though we'd won. And they tried to use video footage. Anyway, it didn't work, and Elka and I had to get up and swim the heats of the individual 200 free the next morning. And so what my greatest asset was the ability to sleep anytime, anywhere, switch off. It's like the more pressure, the more stress on my brain, my body goes, you can't deal with this, I'm going to switch you off. So had a great sleep, woke up the next morning and swam the heats of the 200 free, felt good. Semi-finals, felt good. And then into the final, I just had this feeling, and it was just one of those swims that we all talk about where everything comes together. Right. And it's not that it felt easy, but it just felt like I was in control the whole way. I knew I didn't have the speed to go out with the rest of the girls. I knew I had to be within half a body length at the 100-meter mark. And I knew that if I was within a whiff of the leader at the 150-meter mark, I won. Like, I just knew. Really? And I just felt this surge in that last 50 of like another level that just came when I needed it. And pure euphoria. When you hit the wall and turn around, you realize you've won a world championship. It's just, it's like nothing else. And I think I screamed, and everyone at home said it nearly broke the, broke the TVs because my scream was so loud and piercing. And, but my mum was in the crowd watching me, and it was it was just awesome. And I was probably, as again, the older I get, the more proud I was of the fact that we'd come from a really big controversy in this DQ the night before. I managed to turn it around by the next day and go, right, today's a new day, next job, let's get on with it. And I think that's something I've always been pretty good at, is like, right, okay, can't control that situation anymore, move on, what's next?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great lesson too, because that's really swimming in a nutshell. You just got to put it behind you. You can't worry about the ups and the downs. You just got to roll with the punches. I think the best athletes do that,
Yeah. And it's not always going to work out. I think I've always said, and it'd be interesting to see if you agree, that there's many athletes that can do it once or have success once, but it is so much harder to have consistency over a career. It is so hard to have consistency and to back it up. And more than anything, what you want to do is to prove to everyone that it's not a fluke. Prove to everyone, including yourself, that you're just not a one-hit wonder. That you can do it, and you want that feeling more than anything. I often describe myself when I was swimming as an addict. I was an addict to that feeling of hard work paying off and the success that came with it. And getting up and singing a national anthem on a podium was my absolute addiction. And I wanted nothing more than to feel that again. So there has to be a part of resilience in there. There has to be a overcoming adversity of some description. There's good times, there's bad times, but the good times are so much sweeter when you have had a few things that have kept you down beforehand.
How did you manage the fame and the fortune kind of in a way that came with that as a swimmer? We're not making millions and millions of dollars like Thorpe, but certainly you've got money coming in now, and you're getting some sponsors and publicity. I find that's challenging for a lot of swimmers to go from kind of nothing to something all of a sudden. How was that for you?
In some ways, I was really fortunate. Because I was 15 when I made my first Australian team and had my first little bit of success, I actually had sponsors from the age of 15. Right. And I was fortunate in the fact that there was money coming in, and it wasn't huge money, but it was good money. Yeah. And it meant that I could definitely support myself. I wasn't reliant on my parents like a lot of athletes are. Right. I didn't have to look at trying to get a part-time income or find other ways to support myself. Yeah. So swimming became my job from quite an early age. And at the start, that was amazing. And it set me up for life. I'll be quite honest. You know, my dad was really good in the finance department and sat me down and said, look, you're earning money from a young age. You can blow it all on the latest, whatever you like. I think at that stage, it was a digital camera and sunglasses were the cool thing to have, like back in, 98, 99.
Yeah.
But he said, but if you want to be smart with your money and save it up and put enough aside for a deposit on a piece of real estate, you'll be ahead for the rest of your life. And that's proven correct for me. So I would be lying if I said that I wasn't also driven by the dollars that came with swimming. Not the fame side. I didn't like nor need the fame side. And I know that's really easy to say, but I've probably felt more pressure to look a certain way in that department.
Yeah.
Whereas the money side, I really enjoyed because, as I said, I felt like I was setting myself up for my future. I really felt like I was putting down pavers at that point that were going to set me up for the rest of my life. And I loved that feeling of independence and knowing that I could support myself. So that was a driver. And it wasn't probably until I was after those World Championships in Fukuoka that I probably had a moment where I also realized that all of a sudden that fear of failure came, because I realized that there were other people relying on me and that I had a responsibility to other people other than myself and my coach and my squad and my family. And so there was definitely a time for me where I questioned, oh my gosh, do I want to do this? Is this what I want to do? Am I cut out for this? What happens if it doesn't work? What happens if I don't succeed? What happens if I don't have the performances? There's a lot of people that are relying on me. And so that was a really big, hard moment in my career. I had a really hard Commonwealth Games in 2002 in Manchester where I was the reigning world champion, and I had gone home after Fukuoka and gone, right, I want to prove that was not a fluke. I'm going to work harder than I ever had before. And we did. I was nearly breaking world records in training. Like, I was flying, and we were doing 15 sessions a week. We were doing big work,
a week.
Yeah. Like big work. And again, I loved it because, as I said, all I wanted to do was prove that wasn't a fluke. I wanted the feeling more than anything again. And so that next 12 months I was so proud of the work that we put in, and came to Commonwealth Games in Manchester, and I'm the reigning world champion, 200 free. And I'll never forget it. I never felt good during taper, talked myself through it, never felt good in heats, talked myself through it. Got to the final. I qualified like outside lane, I think, in a final. And I'll never forget, usually the back end of my race is the best of my race, and here I was turning at the 150 meter mark, and I distinctly had a memory of feet on the wall at the 150 meter mark and thinking, I actually don't know how I'm going to get to the other end. I don't know how I'm going to get to the other end. And this is the first time in history that normally redundant lifeguard on the side of the pool that's at every competition is actually going to have to do some work, and they're going to have to come and fish me out. I so remember that, and it was awful. I finished 6th in that 200 free at the Commonwealth Games as, the world champ. And I was beyond gutted because I hadn't allowed myself to think about how shit I was feeling. Until it was all over. And so anyway, it was awful. Came home, as it turns out, I had glandular fever and an infected wisdom tooth. So I had some answers, but it wasn't enough because I felt robbed of the work that I'd put in and that the outcome hadn't eventuated. And so that really, again, launched everything for me, where I wanted to walk away from the sport. I thought maybe that's it. Maybe that's all I've got. Maybe that's the best I'll ever be. Really flat, really depressed, really struggled going to training and all the rest of it. And again, I had a point where I know a lot of athletes go through some really hard points, and I never wanted anything bad to happen, but I remember driving to training at 5 o'clock in the morning and hoping that someone would hit me in the car, like hoping someone would hit me. And I didn't want to die. I just wanted a reason to be in the hospital and to not have to, and some breathing time.
Wow.
So really, really low point. And it was at that point where I really thought about walking away. And my family again said, you know what, maybe you just need a change of scenery. Maybe, you owe it to yourself. You've put so much into it. Maybe you owe yourself, give it another shot with a change of scenery. And that's how I ended up in Melbourne with Popey.
Wow. Yeah, and that's kind of when I really got to know you. I mean, we'd obviously been on teams and traveled together, but I obviously got to know you more then. But that was certainly the point where I knew you had kind of a love-hate relationship with swimming at that point. You certainly still love to compete, and you still love to be part of a team, and still love to represent your country. But the training had really gotten to you at that point. It had really beaten you down for sure.
I also didn't know any other way except to do mileage.
Right.
When I came to Popey, as I said, I only knew how to do kilometres. And not only did I pride myself on that, secondly, it was the only way that I got confidence on race day. Remember, was to say, I've done more work than you, therefore I deserve it more.
Right.
So coming to Popey's squad, where it wasn't as much about the mileage, as I said, it was you and that squad that taught me that you have to train smarter, not necessarily do the kilometers. You need to train smarter. And I didn't know how to do that. That had never been a part of my upbringing or my way of swimming. And so I was struggling with so many things in the fact, well, how do I get confidence on race day if I can't get up there and say I've done more work than you? So I found it really hard in my head to reconcile those two different programs. And as I said to you, all I wanted to do was race and do the part that I loved. But particularly in Australia, we race twice a year. You had the Australian Championships, which doubled as a selection event, and you had the major international of the year. That was it. That was all at that stage, the old school coaches, that's all that they would allow you to race because, again, it was all about doing mileage. You can't miss a week of training to go and do a week of racing.
Yeah.
And that's my only small regret out of swimming, is that if I had my time again, knowing the type of athlete that I was, I would have done a lot more overseas racing, a lot more of the World Cup circuit, a lot more of the Mare Nostrum Tour, any of those meets that you can almost train through them, but I would have got my fix of racing. And that maybe also might have given me a couple more years on my career.
Yeah, I think no doubt for sure. It was certainly a point where I could tell that the training was really wearing on you, but did you make a conscious decision at that point to go back to backstroke, or was just the freestyle not clicking, or what was going on there?
There wasn't a lot of stuff that was clicking, to be honest. And I think probably in my own brain, I had to look at the fact that 100 back, 50 back as a shorter distance meant that I could make that work in my head better with the work that we were doing with Popey and the more sprint-wise program, rather than the 200 free, which had only ever been a great race for me when I was essentially doing distance work. So it wasn't a conscious decision. It was probably more of a subconscious, this is the only way the equation works in my brain, is that if I'm doing less work, then I've got to swim a shorter distance. And hopefully those sprint fibers would come through, which they did. And, that's where very thankful that the sprint fibers never really came through in 100 free, but it came back a little bit in the 100 back and the 50 back.
Well, Popey could coach some backstroke. He knew backstroke real well. So I think you went to the right coach there for sure. And you had Matt Welsh in your group too, who could swim some backstroke. But you were always a phenomenal kicker too. I remember your kick. You had this beautiful kick, and your feet always, you could do some crazy shit with your feet too. Like you had no tendons in your ankles.
Funnily enough, I think it's actually, amazing that you remember that. But I had no flexibility in any other part of my body. Like, I still to this day cannot touch my toes, but my ankles are the
Yeah.
only flexible part of my body.
It's like you have these flippers right at the bottom, you know?
I love to kick. Remember when we had kick sessions? I was like, yes, kick session. Bring it on.
Yeah. And here's me with the clunky
That's
feet.
another thing that I wish that that is another thing that I wish that I worked more on, though. My skills were horrible. My starts were horrible. My turns were horrible. Like, when you really boil it down and strain it out, my skills were terrible. And, you know, that is something that, coming from a distance squad, we weren't as focused on.
Yeah.
And again, if I had stayed in the sport longer and stayed with Popey and, you know, we'd really dissected where my gains could be, it would have absolutely been out of skills. And that's, you know, where I was really poor. And yeah, again, wish that hindsight's a wonderful thing, but wished I'd worked on those skills a little bit more, because I think I could have had much better gains in that department.
Yeah. Well, look, I look at things that I've done with some of my athletes, you know, in the past 10 years, and I think, man, I wish I had have done some of that stuff too. You know, I wish I'd have just coached myself, but you ended up winning, you know, gold medals at the Olympics. So it wasn't terrible, but so that's actually my favorite trip of all the trips, that one back there, that 04 trip. I don't know why that really stands out. I just love that trip. I love that team. I loved everything about the Athens Olympics. It was just one of those games, and you ended up swimming the backstroke leg in the 400 medley relay. And did you guys break the world record in that?
We did. Yeah, we did. Wow. It was it's still, I mean, how can you ever say that Olympic gold medal is not your favorite moment in your sport? But it was there were so many stories about that Olympics, and it was even do you remember getting off the bus the first time that first of all, there was no roof on the pool. There was meant to be a roof on the pool, ran out of time, ran out of money. Open air pool. And I'll never forget getting off the team bus for the first time and seeing the competition venue for the first time. And all the Greek officials were smoking on pool deck. And like 3/4 of the Australian swim team is asthmatic, myself included. And we literally got onto pool deck the first time we're seeing the venue, and they went, "Oh, no, you've all got to get back on the bus. We've got to clear the smoke off the deck." So all our team managers went back and said, "Can you stop smoking on pool deck?" And about half an hour later, we got off the bus and had our first session at the comp pool. Like, it was, but it was an amazing trip. It was an amazing team. And, you know, it is my favorite story, actually, of that 4x1 medley relay. Like, you've got Petria Thomas, who had already won 2 gold medals from that Olympics. You had Liesl Jones, who, by her own admission, had an up and down Olympics up until that point. And Jodie Henry, who I affectionately call the space cadet, because she just had no idea how good she was. She had no idea about being competitive or wanting to win. She was just completely oblivious to the fact that she was as good as she was. And I know you had her on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she's just amazing. I still don't know if it properly sinks in how extraordinary she was. But we're the last event of the Athens Olympics for the swimming. We're the last event on the last day. And so the 4 of us girls are sitting in the marshalling area, and we're watching Hawke win his second consecutive 1500 on the screens in the pool outside, knowing what he had been through, knowing he was swimming with half a lung, was just amazing. But I had an out-of-body experience in the marshalling area where I looked around the room and I realised that we were the only team preparing as a team. Every other team was almost preparing as an individual. And so, there'd be a girl off stretching in the corner, there'd be one girl with headphones on, there'd be one girl, over here doing her thing. And but the 4 of us were sitting there in this tight little group, and we had no need to talk about tactics or to pump each other up. We just had complete faith that each member of this team was going to do their job to the best of their ability. And we were having the most random conversations where I think Patria was engaged at that stage and was about to be married after the Olympics. And she was like, I just need to find a way to get out of the village and go and see Julian, my fiance. And we were almost talking about which exit out of the athletes' village had less security on it at that stage. And then Liesl was like, you know what? I haven't had an ice. I've been so good with my diet and everything. I've never had an ice cream. I've never had anything. And tonight, all I'm going to eat is Magnums for dinner. Like, I'm going to go straight to the ice cream cabinet and that's all I'm going to eat for dinner. And then Jodie was, sitting there with her legs crossed, kind of looking at her fingernails and saying, if we do get to go out, I'm wondering what color I should paint my fingernails. Like, this is a conversation we're having before an Olympic final. And it was amazing. And so, yeah, I wasn't having a great meet by my own admission. I hadn't swum well in my individual events, but that relay just, again, something came alive, and I swam the backstroke leg, broke the Australian record in that lead-off leg, and, it was up against some of the most extraordinary backstrokers of all time. Natalie Coughlin was just a mind-blowing superstar in the lanes next to me. And, again, I felt that I did the best job that I could for that team, and Liesl was phenomenal, Patria was phenomenal, Jodie brought it home like the champion that she is. And so Olympic gold medal and world record. And it was, it's still to this day the reason why I sing the national anthem here in Oz, and I sing loudly, proudly, badly, but, it gives me goosebumps every single time because it takes me back to those kind of moments.
Is Patria a Queenslander as well?
No, Patria's a New South Welshman. She's actually got a pool. She's actually got a pool in Mullumbimby.
Oh,
sure, right. It's Mullumbimby, not Murwillumbah, but Mullumbimby, named after her, the Patria Thomas pool.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, she was a little country town, grew up in a little country town swimming, and before she went to the AIS.
That's right. But it is wild how much talent comes out of Queensland, right? What is it about Queensland?
I think it's not only the weather. The weather is so conducive to being in the water, and you are surrounded by water. If you don't have a backyard pool, your neighbour has a backyard pool. There's not only community pools, but the ocean, there's lakes, there's canals, there's waterway systems. Like, there's just water everywhere. I think it's also
swimming is good too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think back then swimming was a part of the school curriculum growing up. So every kid learnt to swim, and you wanted nothing more than to play with your mates, and so that meant swimming or being in the water of some description. So I think it's just almost innate to Queenslanders to be a competent swimmer, because you need to be a competent swimmer to be able to enjoy the water, and that usually goes on to falling into either a swimming training squad or a surf squad or a triathlon squad of some description.
It's freaky to if we were to put a stat on the amount of Olympic gold medals that have come out of Queensland, in Olympic history, compared to most countries, it'd be staggering, wouldn't it?
Yep. I think there's also something about knowing that history as well. Like, you're surrounded by it. So, every squad has nearly Olympic champions as part of their history.
Yeah.
So I grew up, Miami Swimming Club, and there's all the Olympians that have represented Miami, photos on the wall. So it's every day when you go to training, it's there, like, prevalent, and you want to add your photo to that collection more than anything else. So you're quite aware from a young age of the historical significance of the sport of swimming in Queensland. And as I said, I think, I love that saying, you cannot be what you cannot see. And we literally could see it every day. It was there. It was, these amazing people that had done amazing things, and they were from our squad or our club.
Isn't it crazy to think of, that time where you were then to where you are now and what you've done with your life since then? I mean, it's pretty wild, G. You've had kind of an Olympic experience in broadcasting as well. There's not many people that have gone on to do what you've done in television and broadcasting the way you've done it. So it's just wild. How did that all come about?
Again, I never like saying, I was just lucky. My favorite quote on the back of my bathroom door was, "The harder I work, the luckier I get."
Right.
And I know you love Nitschke as well. So in terms of that, I think it came a time where I was fortunate that I was sponsored by Channel 9 for a couple of the last years of my swimming career. And I got to speak to quite a few people in there. And that was a time of media in Australia where, swimming was massive, and they got you on to many different TV shows just to have a chat. And so, I'd do a chat on the footy show, or I'd do a guest appearance on this, that, and the other. And obviously in Melbourne at the time, I remember that the head of sport at Channel 9 had said to me, "What do you want to do life after swimming?" I was like, "I've got no idea." And he's like, "Well, you can talk. When you hang up the togs, come and see me. I'll see if I can find you a job."
Wow.
And that's pretty much what happened, in the fact that I retired at 23 after the 2006 Commonwealth Games, and I knew I was ready.
You were 23 then?
I was 23, yep.
Jeez.
Yep, the ripe old age of 23, and I knew that I'd had enough, and it was a light bulb moment a couple of months out of Com Games where I recognised for the first time in training that I was actually proud of myself. Isn't that bizarre? When you're in it, all you're thinking about is I'm only as good as my next race.
Right,
I want to prove that's not a fluke. I don't want to rest on my laurels. I've got to do it again. I want that feeling again. I recognised swimming up and down at MSAC that I was proud of myself.
And contentment, I guess, hey?
Yeah, it was more a sense of I took stock of my achievements and went, you know what? It's certainly not like I look back and I have any regrets. I wouldn't do anything differently. I worked my butt off, and I couldn't change any of the outcomes, no matter how hard I tried. And with that realization that I was proud of myself, also came the realization that if I was proud of myself, that maybe I'd also lost that 1% of hunger that is required to compete well at the top level. So it was a bittersweet moment, because it was like, okay, I recognize that if I'm proud of myself, that also means I have no regrets, and it also means I've probably lost that little bit of hunger. So that's probably a good time to call it quits. So I wanted to go out at the top of my game. I wanted to go out on my terms. I wanted to go out when I was ready, and I realized that I was ready. So it's not like I ever made plans for life after, but again, I moved straight into Channel 9 at that stage, who still had the broadcast rights for the swimming. The first thing I ever did, I had to do as part of my contract, was a show called Dancing on Ice, which was massive in the UK, because Torval and Dean, the incredible, Olympic ice skating gold medalists, legends over there, it was their show, Torval and Dean's Dancing on Ice. It was the first thing I did out of swimming. I did 8 weeks of training. Coming from straight out of sport as well, I was like, right, we're training 8 hours a day. And my skating partner was from Wales and came up to about here on me. And he was like, whoa, do we so you want to go back to the rink and go train? I'm like, hell yeah. I was like, right, I've never skated before. I'm not making a fool of myself on national television. We're training until I get this. So we did 8 weeks of training, and I did the first show and first live show. Next day, where I wanted my training partner, we were back on the rink at 7 a.m. the next morning, and broke and dislocated my ankle.
Oh, jeez.
But anyway, it was that story was to show that, it was a time where media in Australia was very accepting of former athletes coming into their world, and I was literally thrown in the deep end on every different type of TV program, and I loved it. It was quite literally sink or swim. And but what I knew more than anything was, particularly doing live TV, the thing I loved about swimming more than anything was race day and getting up on behind the blocks and feeling that adrenaline and knowing that I had one chance to get it right. And all of a sudden, here I am doing live TV with these exact same feelings that I loved.
Right.
So I knew I was in the right place. I had no issue with the transition because all of a sudden I'd found something straight away that challenged me and fulfilled me the same ways that swimming did.
Right.
And yeah, quite quickly traveling all over the world, doing different things for different programs. And
did they give you formal training?
No, that's what I mean. Sink or swim. Have a chat.
Wow.
Have a chat and see what happens. And I think, at that time, and it was probably because I was fortunate enough to have sponsors and have to publicly speak all the way through my swimming career, that translated really well to media world.
Yeah. Yeah, because I watched you at the trials, obviously just recently, and you're so comfortable in that position. And like a lot of people are cliche and they'll say the same things and it's kind of clunky and uncomfortable. Like you relate so well to the athletes. And you just say the right thing at the right time. You get in at the right time. You get out at the right time. To me, it just seems very natural and flowing to me. And I wondered, did they train her to do that, or she's just naturally good at it, I guess?
My favorite part of my job is interviewing athletes.
Really?
I love it because it's not even interviewing athletes, it's interviewing people, because everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. Even the cab driver or your Uber driver that you sit with, they have a story. And even if they don't realize it, most people have extraordinary ways of coming to be where they are at that point in time.
Right.
But with athletes, and particularly swimmers, I actually do get more nervous interviewing them in that live situation than I do doing anything else, even when I was swimming myself. And I get far more nervous watching them race because I almost feel like a proud parent watching them. And I know how much work has gone into that moment, and knowing how much it means to them. And my responsibility, I feel a huge responsibility to allow them to tell their stories because they don't get a chance quite often to tell their stories, and they're relying on us for us to tell their stories for them, what they've been through, what's happened in their lives leading up to that moment, why this moment means so much, the trials and the tribulations of sport, and not only sport but of life that have come to that point in time. And so I always remember hearing, I think it was Andrew Denton that said, a great interviewer will put their ego aside and never make a statement to a person, whereas you want to prove, I can understand it, because when you're interviewing someone, you want to prove that you've done your research. You want to prove that you know their story and that, you're worthy of almost asking that question.
Right, yeah.
If you give them the answer in your question, then you're not actually getting anything from the person you're interviewing. So I'm always trying to find a way to lead that athlete into, the answer that we all want and that we're all looking for, without giving away their answer in that question. And I mean, trials is crazy.
Damn, that's good.
It is. You got to park your ego in a way, and that's why the great talkers will know where you're leading them and give you the answer that you're looking for.
Right.
The young ones are harder because sometimes when you get a one-word answer, you've got to give them a bit more in that question to get them to say something back to you. But I mean, trials was extraordinary. I've never cried so much, either tears of happiness or tears of being shattered for athletes like I did on live TV, because, those stories were amazing. Like Kaylee McEwen, 10 months to the day since she lost her dad, and here she is breaking a world record. Athletes that walked away basically when they knew Olympics had been postponed for 12 months, not knowing how they were going to get through 12 months. Athletes that had changed coaches or had surgery or all these things that they never would have done if the Olympics had been on last year.
Yeah.
So there seem to be more stories of resilience at these trials.
How is there a girl going 153 in the 200 freestyle, G? Like,
how is there 4 Australian women under 53 seconds?
oh, that's madness, man. That's so good. Yeah. So good.
It's, and you know what? I didn't expect it, Hawke. I think I can probably say that in the fact that, Australian swimming has been, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but we've been in a bit of a lull for the last few years. And I just feel like this trials ignited everyone. Like the last 12 months have been extraordinary for a lot of athletes where they're like, right, why am I doing this? How do I change what I'm doing to make sure that, this timeline has been pushed out? What do I do to make sure that I'm ready by the time this timeline comes around again? And I was blown away by not only the times, but the depth in so many of those events. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's nice to see kind of a resurgence in a way of Australian swimming because, I'm over in America and it's nice to hear Americans talking about Australians again in a competitive sense. Like, oh, they've got a team. Like it's just not 1 or 2 players anymore. It's like the Aussies have a team again and it's nice, like that rivalry, that competitiveness going into an Olympics is pretty cool. So
it's amazing. And I think also it's really helped us doing what the Americans do and doing the trials 5 to 6 weeks out.
Yeah.
I think that was a really great move because before it was 6 months out. And as you know, a lot can change and a lot can happen in 6 months. So this way we know we've got our most informed team. And I think that in some ways has added to the pressure. And that way those athletes that are good with pressure have really learnt to adapt to this that new timeline, and it's working for them.
Yeah, it's awesome to see. I love the resurgence. I love they got some potential gold medalists out there too, which is awesome. Now you're going to Tokyo?
No, I was meant to go last year. We're having a huge issue once again here in Australia with COVID. And so calling it off a screen in Melbourne at this stage.
Really?
So, yeah, it's going to. I mean, it's much harder from a broadcasting point of view. We had a couple of guys that had to do it for trials even. Nicole Livingston and Hawke were out of Melbourne. They were meant to be in Adelaide and couldn't get out due to COVID restrictions. And so we'll be calling it all off a screen for Tokyo. And I must admit, I find that makes my job so much harder because when you're not on pool deck, you're not being able to see what's happening off camera. You're not able to see coaches' reactions. You're not able to see what someone's looking like behind the blocks. All of those things make reading the situation so much harder. So again, my responsibility is the athletes, and I just hope that we're able to do them justice.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but if there's anyone to do it, you'll do a great job, I'm sure of it. Listen, I know you got a young family there, and they're probably running around looking for mum. So I appreciate your time and taking an hour out. And so you and your husband are macadamia farmers now?
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like, talk about we literally moved to northern New South Wales about a month ago now. 3 weeks ago, a month ago now. So we have 150 acres and 6,000 macadamia nut trees. And we are on the farm, loving life. The kids, my son's out on his 4-wheeler. My daughter's got a pony. So we're doing the tree change and loving it.
That's super cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we got to catch up, and good to see you. And I'll be certainly listening into the broadcast. So good luck with all that. All right.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hawke. Awesome chat.
Yep. Thanks, G. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.